So when thinking about giving my testimony, I know most testimonies probably conversion stories. Didn't know Christ and how you came to know Christ in your life after Christ, and my coming to know Christ story is it's pretty simple. I came to know Christ at a young age. I was 8 years old. I lived in San Antonio, Texas at the time, and prayed to receive Christ in a Sunday school class. And my family was military, so soon after that we made a move to Shreveport, Louisiana, and that's where I began to grow a little bit more. And I've finally decided to follow through with baptism a few years later after coming to know Christ. Just took me a little while to understand that whole process and understand why we needed to be baptized as Christians. And it took a Sunday school teacher to kind of pour into me to see that. Part of what a testimony means to me is to talk about the way that God has showed up in my life. And for me, that really started when I was an 8th grader going into the 9th grade. And my family, my dad had retired from the Air Force, and we moved to Orange Park, Florida. And we left Louisiana hoping to leave some family issues that we had. We were trying to leave some things behind there, but it just didn't work. And my parents brought some marital issues with us when we moved to Florida. And as a result of that, a few years into living in Florida, my parents actually decided to get a divorce. And so at that point in time, I was in 8th grade, and I'd been in church all my life. Came to know Christ at a young age and had been poured into and been discipled. And so much of my faith was a faith that my family shared, that we talked about a lot, but that I don't think I ever really saw acted out. And when it came to my parents splitting up, this was really hard on me as an 8th grader. And it was also one of the things where I didn't really know what to do about it. I didn't know where to turn. Because my parents had kind of always been there for me to provide that comfort that parents do. And I remember my parents were fighting one time, and I had gone out to my backyard, and it was at that point in time just the right combination of different things of my youth pastor pouring into my life, and where my parents were in their marriage, and the way that God had been there for me up until this point, and I didn't really, like I said before, my faith was something that I shared with my family, but it just wasn't something that my parents, neither of them were very vocal on. We went to church and we proclaimed that we knew Christ as a family, but it was not something that took action, I guess you could say, in our everyday life. And so it kind of came down to making a decision at that point in my life where I had to decide what I was going to do with my parents splitting up. And I could either turn and see what the world had to offer about the situation, and see how other kids were dealing with similar things in their life, or I could turn to my faith, the faith that I claimed that I had, and trust this God that I had known since such a young age. And ultimately, that's what I decided to do. I remember going out back, my parents were fighting, and just praying for that comfort, that He would give me comfort. And in that moment, I was comforted. And in that moment, it became a lot more real to me than it ever had. That even if my parents were splitting up, and ultimately, no matter what happens in my life, that Christ is going to be there for me no matter what, and that He will never leave me nor forsake me. that I have him as a spiritual father. So there was a point in my life where I came to know Christ, but then there's another point in my life where it definitely things became real. I guess is the best way that I can put it. Where it wasn't just a faith that we talked about. It wasn't just a faith that where I prayed a prayer and I said something, but it was something that I began to actually act on and act out and let it come in and affect the way that I live my life. And ultimately, as a teenager going into those years, is when I began to see that change, that follow through with obedience. So that's pretty much my story. That's definitely the start of when God had stepped into my life and got my attention, so to speak.
Here's my